When I get the question, what is Aristos about? I find that I have a strangely hard time answering that, because on one hand, there is an obvious answer. I could say that this is an adaptation of the Iliad, this is a reinterpretation of the story of Achilles and Patroclus, a familiar story. But on the other hand, what I hear when I'm asked that question is what makes Aristos distinct? What is Aristos's point of view on the Iliad, a work that has been interpreted and reinvented so many times that it's pretty much impossible to say anything new about it? So by way of answering this question, I'm going to defer to another interpretation of Homer that really shaped the way that I told Achilles and Patroclus' stories. Achilles in Vietnam and Odysseus in America by Jonathan Shea. These books examine the trials of combat veterans, both in war and as they return home and reintegrate into civilian life. And what's really, really fascinating is that they use the stories of Achilles and Odysseus, the Iliad and Odyssey, as frameworks to understand the veterans' experience. I could talk about these books all day, but I imagine that I do not have the expertise to say anything interesting about them. I merely wanted to point to two quotes from these books that really spoke to me. The first, from Achilles in Vietnam, reads, "Any army, ancient or modern, is a social construction defined by shared expectations and values. Some of these are embodied in formal regulations, defined authority, written orders, ranks, incentives, punishments, and formal task and occupational definitions. Others circulate as traditions, archetypal stories of things to be emulated or shunned, an accepted truth about what is praiseworthy and what is culpable. Altogether, these form a moral world that most of the participants, most of the time, regard as legitimate, natural, and personally binding. The moral power of an army is so great that it can motivate men to get up out of a trench and step into enemy machine gun fire. So, what Dr. Shea is saying here is fascinating. He's saying that armies are bound together by the power of myth, by the power of story. And this leads me to the second quote that I wanted to share with you all today from Odysseus in America. Near the end of the book, Dr. Shea says, "When trauma survivors hear that enough of the truth of their experience has been understood, remembered, and retold with enough fidelity to carry some of the truth, no one who did not experience their trauma can ever grasp all of the truth, then the circle of communalization is complete." Wow. When you enter the world of the Iliad, you're entering a world where mythos is the glue holding everything together. It's holding together this dynamic of friend versus foe, of us versus them, even the ranks within armies and the contractual obligations that exist between those ranks and what each of those ranks means, which is at the heart of Achilles' dispute with Agamemnon, his sense that his contract with his superior officer, this narrative that they're supposed to be following, the sense that that has been broken, and when that is broken, the way that it unravels all the other myths, all the other stories that the army is telling him, the myths that are enabling him to get up out of the trench and step into machine gun fire for the army. And then when you go into the Odyssey, you see it really coming full circle. You see Odysseus using myth to frame his own life. You see him turning his own life into myth to explain his own experiences to himself, as well as to explain his experiences to people who they cannot possibly understand what he's been through. They cannot possibly understand what he's seen. And he is using myth to frame his own life, to make it something that other people can understand. So essentially, what you have here with myth making is this device that caused intense trauma in the Iliad. You have Odysseus turning that on its head and using this same device to share his trauma and to heal from his trauma. And this is a dichotomy that I really, really wanted to explore in Aristos. You have moments in the libretto like adolescent Achilles and Patroclus looking at the sky after their mentor has passed away and saying, "We know that this constellation isn't him, but from now on, we're going to pretend this is Chiron so that we can find hope and comfort and joy and anchor aspects of our personal experience in the real world around us. Come up with an origin story that makes this world feel more personal to us and makes the world feel more like ours." But at the same time, by the same token, you have the Greek army coming up with narratives, coming up with these stories to justify coming into Troy and taking everything that isn't theirs and making the world theirs. Because I think that's at the heart of myths. It's the question, how do I make this world mine? How do we make everything that doesn't make sense about this world? How do we make all of this ours? How do we own it? And sometimes you do so in ways that are healing and that bind you to community. And sometimes you do so in ways that justify violence and cruelty and systemic injustice. Anyway, would highly recommend these books. These are incredible reads. And I would also like to hear from you what your favorite interpretations of Homer are, whether they're books, movies, TV shows, scholarship, anything in between. Anyway, thank you so much for listening, and we're so excited to share the album with you. See you soon.